Welcome back to A Fresh Story, the podcast where we have conversations about brave decisions to start over again. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Jenny, and we're so glad you're here today.
Hello, sister. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited about the guests that we had on this episode.
Is that your confession?
It is a confession. It's a confession.
It's a Wednesday, and you're making a confession,
It
which is very appropriate.
It is. Rachel Sobel is... she's a writer, she's a mom, she's like an activist, she's just like uses her voice for such good and her platform for good. I connected with Rachel, oh my gosh, I don't even know how many years ago, so many years ago, and I actually managed her for a while, like influencer stuff, and we just kind of always have been intertwined, and so it was really fun. We always joke that like we use the podcast as a way to get like, our friends to just chat.
It's not really a joke.
Okay, it really isn't a joke. We really just use the podcast to get people we love to come talk to us for an hour. And she's so open about her divorce story and also like just like marriage, like it was like how she met her second husband was so sweet. And
she posted something the other day and I responded to her. It was about like sort of like intimacy and long-term relationships and marriages. And she was like, you know, people want you to believe that like it's tough if you're with somebody long-term to like continue being romantic with them, but like it's not if you're with the right person. And I just really appreciated that because so much of the rhetoric about marriage and long-term relationships is like negative. And I just love when people are really in love with their spouses. And I love that.
Yeah, and she talks about motherhood and like raising a teenager and like having a younger child, and she's just so authentic and real and just a beautiful, beautiful soul. So we laughed a lot on this episode. She's hysterical. She's known for her humor. You've probably seen her all over the internet. She's memed a lot. So enjoy the episode with Rachel Sobel, and please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to A Fresh Story so that we can keep telling fresh start stories. Rachel is an award-winning writer, author, speaker, do-over wife, mom to 2 girls, short order cook, laundress, lunch packer, boo-boo kisser, and chauffeur. She was awarded Romper's 2020 People's Choice Award at Mom 2.0 and is a 2-time finalist for Parenting Blogger of the Year and the South Florida Blogger Awards. She's the creator and co-host of the lifestyle podcast Friends Without Benefits with co-host Dale McLean, the in-arena host of the Miami Heat and host of their 2023 All-Star Game. You do so much, Rachel. I don't know how you sleep. She has work published in 2 anthologies, including Jen Mann's New York Times bestseller, I Just Want to Hang Out With You. Rachel has written for HuffPost, Romper, Today Show Parents, PopSugar. Honestly, the list goes on for about 3 sentences. She has appeared on NPR, The Doctors, The Tamron Hall Show, Kelly Clarkson Show. It says she is still not fully recovered from Kelly calling her hilarious on national television. We stand Kelly. We love Kelly. And Rachel lives in South Florida with her second and final husband, her 2 feisty daughters, and her 2 dogs that make her lose her mind regularly. And she comes to us from her very glamorous closet, as always, her signature closet. So, Rachel, we're thrilled to have you here today.
I am so excited to be here and actually talk to you girls in real time instead of just trading comments on social media.
I know. I feel like I've known you for a long time, I feel like. And, you know, we've kind of like been in and out of each other's lives for like I feel like maybe 10 years. Like it's been like a long time.
It was a long time. I feel like we go back to like the whole influencer stuff. I mean, like a really long time.
And you were actually one of the first like divorced moms that I knew. And then when I went through my divorce, you reached out and you were so sweet and so helpful. And then we worked on influencer stuff together. And now you're just like all over the place, doing everything all the time. And what we love about you for so many reasons is that you have such a beautiful community that you've cultivated on the internet, and you really are the definition of holding space for people. You know,
thank you for saying that.
It's true. That's
the biggest compliment you could give me.
Yeah, it's true. So thank you for being here and taking the time.
Thank you.
How are you doing today? What is it? It's Tuesday morning that we're talking.
Yeah, I'm home on day 2 with a kid with strep, so I'm doing great. Not doing great, Jenny. And this is the second bout of it. So we're just, yesterday we made TikToks. We've just been doing everything we can to possibly stay busy, but she's 6 and she needs to be
Yeah.
entertained. She's not like a teenager who's going to be having her face in her phone all day. So I'm working double time trying to work, trying to get stuff done, trying to run my household and take care of a sick kid.
It's
Yeah.
a lot.
It is a lot.
I observe it as a very involved aunt, and it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a
Yeah,
lot.
especially like at the end of the school year when they're sick at the end of the school year. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Just get to the end of the school year. Like,
That's
so
what this is every day. I'm like, we have a few weeks because we end in Florida, we're backwards in a lot of ways. And so
Mhm.
we end like before Memorial Day. And I'm like, to my older one, I'm like, can you just not get in trouble for looking at your phone for 3 more weeks? And my little one, I'm like, can we not get any more sickness? 3 more weeks. We have 3 more weeks and then it's time for camp. And like, we can all disconnect a little bit.
Yeah, 100%.
100%. You absolutely need that. Well, let's take ourselves back and go back to the beginning of your fresh start story where there was no strep, hopefully.
Yes, no strep, a lot of other things.
A time before strep.
So first of all, I love what you guys are doing with the whole idea of fresh starts because I think there's so many people out there, particularly women, who find themselves on the cusp of a new beginning and they're filled with fear, right? And uncertainty and all these things. And that's all valid. Like change is scary. Doesn't matter if you're 5 or 55, change is scary. My fresh starts are interesting for me because it was two for the price of one. I basically went through a divorce, which was terrible. And thankfully met my second and final husband, as you said, and remarried. And so that was one fresh start. But at the same time that was happening, I was also having a metamorphosis in my career. I'd spent almost 20 years in public relations, launching tech startups and making a name for myself in PR in the agency world and with technology companies. And then I just burnt out. I couldn't do it anymore. I was working in-house for a communications company and I hated every second of it. And I really kind of put my money where my mouth was and put all the pieces together so that I could freelance and just write for people and create content and leave and work from the privacy of my own home and be at my kids' school stuff and not have to answer to anyone. And that was going on the same time as I was in this new relationship and marriage. And so it was kind of like twofold for me in terms of fresh starts.
That's interesting. I have so many questions for you today for a lot of reasons. I was thinking while I was taking my morning walk today about divorce, obviously. And, you know, you and I both have this, we are like the Pied Pipers of divorced women. And, you know, I was thinking about divorce because it's something that's obviously very common, yet it's really traumatizing. And so, can you take us back a little bit? You know, I know you're pretty open about some stuff, kind of like how, you know, you went, like, you got married to your first husband, you had your daughter, and then what kind of transpired after that that got you to the place of going through the divorce?
It was never a good relationship, if I'm being
Mm.
very honest. I think that there were so many red flags, but I was young. We
Yep.
met in college. I think I felt the societal pressure and the self-imposed pressure of,
Yeah.
okay, now I have this serious boyfriend. We've been together for 8 years. We have to get engaged. We have to get married. And then I was also naive and in my 20s thinking, I'm not throwing this away. I've invested 8 years of my life. I'm getting that ring and I'm getting married and
Mhm.
everything will be okay. And I
Mhm.
think I genuinely believe that in my own reality. It was never the truth. It was never okay. I mean, we were very dysfunctional from the beginning, breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together. It was tumultuous. It was ugly. The highs were really high. The lows were really low. And I think I just shut everyone out who tried to tell me otherwise. Because as you probably know, when you're in an unhealthy relationship for whatever reason, until you're ready to accept that like you need to
Yeah.
make some hard choices, you don't want to hear what anyone has to say. And I
Yeah.
think that any woman who's going through a divorce or man, but I speak mostly to women who are going through it, you have to be ready to leave on your own accord. There's nothing anyone can say to you that's going to convince you because it's a very tough decision and nobody lives in your shoes. Nobody has to split up silverware. Nobody has to share custody. Like
Mhm.
you're the one living that life. And so you have to make that decision on your own. And so I think that I grappled with that for many years. And I just kept convincing myself, okay, if we get married, we'll be okay. When we have a
Mhm.
baby, it'll be okay. Like you don't break up when you get married, you're in it to win it. That's it. And I think I just convinced myself of all this bullshit that I needed to hear to stay in a very unhealthy situation, and it was perpetuated by my own ability to cut people off or distance myself from people who had truths to tell me that I didn't want to hear. And of
And
course, I'm very thankful because most of those people were back in my life when it was over. And instead of
yeah,
the whole "I told you so's," they were
yeah,
there. They were there for me and they
yeah.
understood. And it was beautiful and amazing. And I've never been met with anything less than support from my core group of friends. And I think that that is huge when you're going through a
Yeah.
divorce. Huge.
100%.
It's so funny. I left an engagement. We were together from the time I was 23 until I was 33. We were engaged for 2 years, mostly because of the pandemic. We would have gotten married, about a year after. And about a year, the thing that sort of made me leave finally was that we were talking about having kids, and he said, "I don't think I'm in love with you anymore." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I took off my ring, and it was so easy in that moment. It wasn't until later that I realized a year before that, we'd had a conversation, about a year, maybe 9 months. We got into a big fight and he was like, "I don't know if I love you." And I was like, okay, pause. We got to take space. We got to break." And we went out and I took a walk with my brother and I came home and I was like, "Of course you love me." Like, of course, I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't ready to end that relationship because, again, all these years, 9 years in at that point, like, what am I going to do? I'm going to throw this away. I knew everything about his finances. I knew everything about his parents. Our parents knew each other. He was the uncle to my nephews. It was so enmeshed, and it wasn't a terrible relationship, but he was looking at me and telling me he didn't love me. And I was not ready to go. And until you're
Yeah,
ready to go, you can't walk away.
you can. And the thing too is that, our relationship was we were not good fighters. And I
Mm.
know that sounds really weird to say
No.
because fighting is not good, but what I notice now, and it's obviously much easier to say that in retrospect and being in a healthy, functional marriage with someone who actually cares whether I'm alive and breathing and
Yeah.
loves me and like wants good things for me. When have an argument or a fight with my current husband, Jason, the rebound is
Mhm.
completely different than it was
Mhm.
in my
Mhm.
first marriage. There was no rebound. We would fight and fight and fight until we were just tired of fighting, and then there was no resolution, and so all that resentment on both sides would
Yeah.
build up and up and up, and it was the same argument over and over and over again about stupid stuff from when we were in college, not even like adult things, like that was
Right.
a thing, and I think that I just needed to be pushed to my limit, which I can't even tell you. Everyone is always like, "Oh, when did you know?" There was no one moment when I knew. We literally, every time we fought, he would threaten to divorce me. And I
Mhm.
was so sick of being threatened that one day I felt like I didn't even do it. It was like my body took over. One
Yes.
day I was like, okay. And
That's
I called
exactly
him to
what it
talk the
is.
next day because I was so sick of fighting. I didn't want my child to grow up like that.
Yeah.
I came from a divorced home. So I knew what it was like, even though I was much older when my parents got divorced. I knew what it was like to absorb that acrimony of two parents
Mm.
even if they weren't fighting, just the tension. And I did not want that for my child. I didn't know
Yeah.
my
Mhm.
future health. I didn't know if I ever wanted to get remarried again, but I knew I needed to get out of there because I was a shell of myself and I didn't think I'd survive. I genuinely look back on
Uh-huh.
that. I did not think I would survive, whether I would end up with a mental breakdown. I don't know, but I knew that if I stayed a second longer, I had
Mhm.
at that point reached my limit and I was done. And that's when the ball started rolling.
Yeah, cosign, by the way, all of that. I totally understand it. Like, and it's hard to explain that to people. It's a visceral feeling that comes over your body.
Yeah.
And I always say it's almost like my ancestors pushing me. Right?
Yeah.
Like there was like somebody, the wind from behind was going, "No, girl, you got to get out of this for you and the kids." I really understand that. It brings tears to my eyes. So what was the next phase like? Like, did you approach him and say like, "Okay, and what the divorce?" Or
I literally looked at him, I was like, "Okay," and I think he thought I was bluffing,
Mhm.
but I protected myself and I called an attorney the next day, and that's the other thing too, is I think that people are not educated enough on that process, right? Like,
yeah.
listen, mediation, I'm sure is great for some people. If you can use a mediator, that's probably the most peaceful way to go about it. I knew that that was not gonna protect me. I needed
Yeah.
someone who was gonna fight for me and have my best interests and not be a neutral party, right? So I
Mhm.
did my research. My friend, thankfully, one of my best friends was an attorney and connected me with someone who she trusted, and so I implicitly trusted them, and it was scary. Nothing about it was good. I was scared. By that point, I had just moved back from New York to South Florida. I had quit my job at his request because I was going to take care of my child and get her acclimated in preschool. I had no source of income, and I had always been the breadwinner up until that
Mm,
point. So I
interesting.
had no source of income, and I literally felt trapped. But I also felt like, you know what? I can't live like this under someone's thumb. I can't have
Mhm.
someone
Yeah.
questioning what's that Amazon package you ordered? What is that? I can't be micromanaged. So I just have to kind of like put my game face on, pour myself into my child, make sure that she's stable because she was little. She was 2 when we got
Mhm.
divorced. Thank God. I thank God. People are always like, "Whoa, when is the right age to do it?" There is no right age. Your kids are going to need therapy regardless of when you
Yep.
do it. But she has no
Yes.
recollection of us being in the same house. She has
Yeah.
no recollection of us being married. She has
Yeah.
no, which I think is actually a good thing in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But it was very scary. It was scary talking about finances. It was scary knowing that I was now going to have to depend on someone in some way financially until I found a job who did not like me. He did not like me, did not want to help me. And here I
Mhm.
am, this person who's always been independent, fought for every job I've ever had, gotten major promotions, carved a name for myself in my industry. And now I'm at the mercy of someone
Mhm.
who's in total control of me financially.
Right.
And that was the worst, most I felt like a prisoner.
Yeah, you do. You really do. It's I could talk about this with you forever because for so many reasons. But what's interesting is I was just saying this to Jenny the other day. When you go through a divorce with somebody that hates you, and is walking around this planet hating you all the time, everything else, you're like, fuck everything else. I'm gonna do whatever I want. There's somebody on
Yeah.
this planet that wants me to die, and that's
100%.
and like
And not only
everything.
somebody, but the person that was supposed to love you the most and
Right,
support you the most has made that huge 180. And
right,
yeah.
and like the
Well, you
person
know
that
what I
you,
said?
yeah,
I said this the other day, I'm like, I almost feel like when people get married because when I look back on it, I have such fucked up thoughts from my wedding day. My
yep.
wedding day was amazing. I had the best time, but also the paradox is that there was a moment, and it took me until this year to admit this out loud. There was a moment where I sat there quietly and I was like, what if he doesn't show up?
Mm,
That is not a normal thought to have, and
No.
I
mhm,
just continued to walk down the aisle as if that
Mhm.
didn't happen, and I convinced
Mhm.
myself that other people must feel this way, and when I look back at all those red flags, I'm like, "God, I should have listened," and obviously, I know the reason I didn't listen is because I was meant to have my daughter who
yep.
Yep.
I would walk through hell and back 10 times over, knowing exactly the outcome as it is to have her in my
Mhm.
life. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. She just happened to come from the worst, and that's a really big mind fuck. That is
Yeah.
a really big mind fuck, but I think that I agree with you. I think that when you go through that and you realize that you can no longer trust the person that you promise to spend the rest of your life with,
Yeah.
and there's all this ugliness instead of beauty, it you look at things differently.
Yep.
Nothing messes with you as much because that's the hardest thing at that point that I personally had to
Yep.
go through.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so everything else that was thrown my way, I was like, this is
Mhm.
nothing. Like I can handle this
Yeah.
because right now I'm in the fight of my life to survive and
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
pick myself back up. And it took me a
Yeah.
while to do that.
Yeah, it does. And I know for me, and I probably for you because you're a Jewish mama also, that it's like the primal instinct comes out, right? And you're like, I'm just gonna get through this incredibly hard time. And I was the same way. I knew I would not survive.
Yeah.
Whatever was gonna happen was gonna happen. And so I was like, okay, the next couple of years are gonna be shitty. I'm gonna have to get through this, right? But I knew I could see, and I know you're pretty spiritual yourself.
Yeah.
You can see the other side. You just don't know how to get there yet. And I
Mhm.
try to explain this to so many of my friends, which I want to talk about this in a little bit, but who are in these horrible marriages currently. And I'm like, like we said, you can't tell somebody when to leave, but you can explain a little bit what the other side looks like. And
Yes.
Yes.
it's really hard to understand that unless you get to the other side.
You can't pull them through, but you can like signal to them from the glass.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
totally right, and I think it's interesting because that's what in the beginning, when I started openly talking about my divorce on social media, those were the messages I would get from women saying, like, "I am in the thick of it now. I can't even see the other side, but when I see the pictures you post or I see the stories you tell or I
Yeah.
watch your stories that you when you talk about going through a divorce and what that was like, I know there's hope on the other side, and that fuels me a little bit more." And then that in turn fueled me, and it was like this
Yeah.
mutually beneficial relationship because we're all kind of holding each other up knowing that you're going to be okay. Like
Yep.
you are
Mhm.
going to be okay. It's going to suck. It's going to be scary. You're going to be put through the ringer, but you're going to be okay. You're going to survive it and you're going to be better because you're going to
Mm-hmm.
shed that ugliness and chaos and it'll turn into something else. I also tell people that I never said this until recently. You think you're done with a divorce when you sign the divorce papers. I am 10 years out. I'm still dealing with legal stuff. I'm still dealing with custody stuff. I'm still dealing.
Yeah.
It doesn't end when you
No.
have acrimony, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't impact my life in the sense that I'm not in a functional, happy marriage and I have a beautiful family, but it does add a layer of chaos that
Yeah.
when you move on with someone, you have to make sure they know that they're not just getting a stepchild, they're getting an ex-husband, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
big responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting a whole dynamic that they know nothing about that they're going to have to watch and learn and understand how to handle because you can't make it go away. There's so many layers to it
Yeah.
that are involved when you move on from a divorce and you blend a family.
I want to talk about that. I definitely want to get into that for sure. So when you were going through it and your daughter was so young, what kept you going during that time?
That's a great question. I think a few, I don't know how you felt when you went through yours. I had the very stereotypical one day I would feel like curling into the fetal position and giving up. And the next day I would be like, fuck this. I
Mhm.
am a badass and I'm going to get through this. And it literally flip flopped back and forth. I think as cliche as it sounds, it was my daughter that got me through it because I didn't want her to feel the way that I was feeling. I wanted her, regardless of what was going on, to have stability, to have peace, to have two parents that loved her, regardless of what our marriage looked like. I
Yeah.
was still stuck living in the same house with him while we were going through a divorce, which was
Yeah.
terrible,
Yeah,
but
I did
we
that
had no
too.
other choice. I mean,
Yep.
there were so many pieces of it where I really just kind of turned all of my attention towards her. I threw myself into looking for freelance jobs so I could start to bring in some income and save some money, which was not easy being a full time mother with a preschooler. I threw myself into being the room mom. I threw myself into her activities. I really made everything about her.
Mm,
And because it wasn't about me, I think it made it easier to function because I had a responsibility to her
right.
to do
Yeah.
so many logistical and emotional things to make sure she was okay.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say too, Rachel, yes, you met your ex-husband and you got through all of that because of your daughter, but you also obviously are where you're supposed to be to help other people through this too.
You sound
You
like
know,
my therapist. My
it's
therapist.
it's true.
I I tell her that I feel when I look back at myself then, I feel ashamed and weak and like I can't even believe it's the same person because that's not who I am. And she always says to me, "But what if you weren't ashamed and weak? What if you were just a badass who had a calculated exit because you knew you had to
Hmm.
do things a certain way?"
Yep,
And it's true. I just don't think we look at ourselves and we don't give ourselves enough grace. We're
we
very
don't.
hard on ourselves.
We don't. And
Mm-hmm.
it's funny, my therapist always says to me, she says, "You saw the red flags. You just chose to ignore them because you had a plan." Right. And, I wouldn't be where I am, right? I wouldn't have my kids. And I had
Or your
very
company.
similar, right, my company, very similar feelings about my own wedding day. I have very mixed feelings looking back on it, which again,
Mhm.
I think we could have a whole other podcast episode to
Yeah.
talk about that. So you get through the divorce and let's talk about your wonderful husband, Jason. So
Yeah.
how did you meet Jason?
So we met the way the kids do it now on Match.com.
Yeah.
Mm.
I had never been on a dating app before that because I met my first husband in college before that even was a thing. And it was terrible. That whole experience was terrible. Not meeting him, just online
Yeah.
dating.
Yes.
It's
I did
terrible.
get out very unscathed because I met him fairly quickly once I started, which was a year and a half, almost 2 years after we separated. And I'd already had my rebound and that whole thing. Stella got her groove back and the whole, quintessential post-divorce story. I met him on Match, but the really funny part was that when we started talking, we realized that we were at college, University of Florida, same exact time,
Oh,
had
wow.
tons of mutual friends. I had been in his apartment, never laid eyes on each other. We'd been at weddings together, single. Like there were so many points where we should have met. And you talked about me being spiritual. I really do think that the universe has these plans laid out and that things shift and evolve and change and we're just meant to kind of go along for the ride. And I feel like that is why there were so many times I should have met him. I was physically in his apartment with my ex-husband in his apartment and we never laid eyes on each other. We have no recollection of each other. And I think that we met after he went through a divorce. I was out of my divorce. We were totally different people with a different level of introspection. And our relationship, even though it started on, messages through match.com, was the most honest, vulnerable conversations. There was no bullshit, no games. Everything was very what you see is what you get. And it just felt exciting and comfortable and sweet and the opposite of everything I'd experienced. And I knew pretty early on in us speaking that I didn't know if I'd get married again because I was so scared to get married, but I knew that this was going to be my future in some way. I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I felt at home with him very quickly.
I love that. So, what's your advice? And I'm asking for a friend.
For
Wink,
friend.
wink. If if you're a divorced mom with young kids,
Yeah.
about the whole thing, the dating, the bringing somebody into your life, like what wise words do you have there for that?
Patience. I think that, it's not someone's fault if they're not good at dating someone with kids, if they don't have kids, right? It's
Hmm.
a very hard thing to understand what it's like to date someone with children. Even if you
Hmm.
think you get it theoretically, until you're in the trenches, it's very different. I was terrified, even though Jason was super gracious about all of it. I was terrified that once he met my child and witnessed like his first meltdown, he would run for the hills,
Hmm.
because he wouldn't be invested in the same way that I was. It's my kid, not his kid. We weren't even married
Hmm.
or engaged, and that terrified me. And so I held off introducing her for a long time.
Hmm.
I don't know. For me, it felt like a long time. I didn't introduce them until 3 months of
Yeah.
us dating. I felt like that was enough time for me to get my bearings, to know that it was something solid, that it was something
Yeah.
real. I was hypersensitive to bringing a revolving door of men into my daughter's life.
Hmm.
He's the only person she ever met. I never introduced her to anyone else. And I think that you have to have patience because there is a learning curve. Jason was married, but he never had children.
Hmm.
So even though he was very open and excited to meet my kid, you never know how someone's going to react. I mean, I had plenty of failed attempts with people setting up dates before I met him online where they would get annoyed if I had to change things because of a custody schedule or whatever. And that's when I immediately knew, nope, this person's
No.
not for me. But I think if you can have honest conversations with someone you're dating, whether they have kids or not, and give them the lay of the land of what your dynamic looks like, it makes it much easier to move forward. And not to get mad at them when there's like when they get frustrated. Have a conversation about it, explain where you're coming from and try and like get on the same page. I think that the most important thing in any marriage, whether it's a post-divorce second marriage and something I didn't have in my first marriage, is that ability to communicate completely unfiltered, honestly, regardless of what you have to say for fear of being judged or looked at differently. I think if you start from the beginning like that with all the kids stuff and the ex-husband stuff, it sets you up for success moving
Hmm.
forward.
And she was young, right, when they met, when
She was
she met
little,
you.
she was 4. She was
Right.
4 when we met. Yep, she was 4 when we met, 6 when we got married.
We have a stepfather that is our bonus dad. He's the best, and he came into our lives when I was 7 and Olivia was 9, and our brother was what,
4.
4, 3,
Yeah.
4, something like that.
Mhm.
And he doesn't even remember life before my
Our
stepdad.
brother.
Just
Yeah.
yeah, our brother. Did I not say brother?
No, you did.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Our stepdad doesn't barely remembers life before us either. But
Yeah.
and I wonder if your daughter even like remembers life before Jason.
She remembers things that we tell her
Mhm.
and, like, little things here and there, but some of it she was so little that I tend to think it's probably more from, like, stories we've told
Right.
her. We did the whole when we got divorced and we had family pictures of us together, we split them up and they're in her room because it's still her dad is still her family. I would
Of
never
course, yeah.
It's still an integral part of her life, and she will always have a relationship with him, but I don't think, she was so little when it all went down that I think she remembers more her and I living alone together. Like,
Mhm.
she talks about that, like, when we moved into, like, that first post-divorce, like, lady haven where it was just the
Mhm.
girls
The
and
fresh start
were
flat,
on
as we call
Yeah,
it.
we're calling it the Fresh Start Flat now.
I love it, I love it, and I think that she actually has more memories of that
Yeah.
Mhm.
than us living together
That makes
as
sense.
a nuclear family the first time around.
And then you
Yeah.
went ahead and did something else, is that you had another child.
I did.
So
I
talk
was
to us about that a little bit.
I mean, I always in my heart wanted to give my child a sibling. I have a sibling.
Mhm.
You guys have, siblings are the
Yeah.
best.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I know there are people who choose to be one and done, and I think that's amazing. I know there are people who, because of circumstances, I suffered with infertility. I had a miscarriage, so it wasn't an easy
Mhm.
road.
Mhm.
We'd always talked about having a child, and I told him that I would do one. God willing, I would do one, but I could not. I don't want to be outnumbered. I just was very comfortable with like the status quo of 2 on 2.
Yeah.
And so I did have a second baby. 2 weeks before I turned 40, she was born. And it was a lesson in so many things. I mean, everyone was ecstatic. She completed our family. She's the best. But I genuinely, and I wrote about it, I thought I fucked up my family when I brought her home because Jason and me and Ava, my older daughter, had gotten into this groove. We'd gotten into this routine and it was easy and it made sense. And babies are amazing, but they also ruin a dynamic, right? They
Yeah.
shift everything. They suck the life out of the room. Everything becomes about the baby because that baby needs you to survive. They
Yeah.
can't do anything for themselves. And so I was hypersensitive to feeling like I had to constantly be in two places at once, feeling like I wasn't doing enough for my older
Right.
child. The mom guilt set in. I mean, I really looked around and I was like, oh God, did I just screw everything up?
Mm.
And I knew that wasn't the case, but postpartum hormones and all the stuff that
Mhm.
comes along with it, I was a mess. And then we finally, after a few months, kind of got into the groove of, things being more calm in a chaotic way, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And now I can't imagine my family any other way. This isn't what I planned. You don't go into it going, one day I'm going to
I
get
was
married.
gonna
I'm gonna
say
get
that,
divorced,
Rachel.
I'm going to have a second child. I'm going to blend it. No one goes into it with that being the fairy tale, but it is very much my fairy tale. And I would not change a thing. I really wouldn't. I've learned so much. My kids have learned so much. Like it made me a stronger and more resilient mother, I think.
I was gonna say that it's so interesting talking to you because you really are on the other side of all of this stuff in so many ways. So, and I know you talk to a lot of women, probably hundreds of women a day about
Yeah.
divorce. For the women that are still on the other side that see you and they're like, wow, your life is so different, right, than it was in your early 20s. Like, do you ever look back and you're like, what is my life? Like, how did I
Yes.
get here?
Every day. No, I'm not even joking. I've said that to my husband, to my friends. I'm like, "How did I get here?" Like, when something happens or something crazy, whether it's good or bad, I'm like, "How did I get here? Like, how am I've made a career out of completely oversharing my life online, talking about everything from miscarriages to my husband's vasectomy to getting married again to raising a teenager. Like, I am not doing anything I thought that I'd be doing, yet I feel totally equipped to do it most days when I'm not having imposter syndrome. But yeah, I ask myself on a regular basis, how did I get here? And I think it's interesting because when you see these women who you can feel viscerally are in the thick of it because you were in
Yeah.
that spot, I wanna hug them and I wanna say to them, "Listen, it sucks right now, and it's okay that it sucks. You're allowed to be don't let anyone tell you or dictate how you're supposed to feel because you have to go through those feelings to get to the other side. You can't just get out of it unscathed and not be sad and angry and in denial and upset
Mhm.
and go through all those negative emotions to get to the positive ones. They're paired. They go together, the negative and the
Yeah.
positive. So if you don't allow yourself to feel all the shit and then heal from it, you're never going to heal from it. And I say that now as a 46-year-old woman who's always been a super fan of therapy, who's in therapy currently, who just learned this year that there are many things from my first marriage that I thought I had put to bed that I have not put to bed, that I'm
Yeah.
now, for the first time in my life, facing, addressing, saying out loud, dealing with, and moving on from. So even when you think you have uncovered every stone and you've healed from stuff, there's always more work to do. And I think that we need to remind ourselves of that, that it's okay to feel like shit some days. You don't have to feel guilty for feeling like that. Divorce is a big deal. It's life changing. It uproots your entire family and changes everything. So if you're not going to reel from that, then you are not authentically living through it because find it hard to believe that anyone comes out of a divorce, even if it's amicable and they're like doing cartwheels the next day. I mean, you're not addressing your feelings if that's the way that you feel.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, even just to like in all transparency, I mean, I'm a couple of years out too. And I was at the playground the other day and got sad about it, right? It's like
Mhm.
you have moments that you're like, this wasn't the what I thought, right? Or this wasn't the way that my life, and not that I'm so not grateful or I love my life now, but it's that constant kind of like you said, like unturning those rocks and figuring your shit out. Um, I have a question for you. So you and I are in this unique fun club where we were married to people who were not so friendly to us. And I have a lot of people, some of my best friends who are in relationships with men that are not so nice to them. And, divorce is scary, but it's not a dirty word, right?
Mhm.
And so What would you say to a woman that maybe is in a relationship with somebody that is not nice to them? Maybe he's an okay dad, or he does the dishes or whatever.
How you
But
can be an okay dad while being nasty
yeah,
to their mom is always
yeah,
amazes me, but
Always.
yeah. But
Yeah.
like, what do you say to if that was a friend of yours, kind of in that situation?
So I have had these situations, and I don't know if this is right or wrong or if there's a right answer, but I always, like I said, I'm never going to tell someone to get divorced. But I'm also going to be honest, and I will say, I don't really like the way he talks to you or treats you, and I'm never going to tell you what to do. I just want to go on the record of saying it, knowing that I recognize it, whether you do or not, and that regardless of what you choose to do, I will support you. I will have your back. And if things fall apart, I'll be here to pick you up. And if you decide to stay in it, I will be here to listen to you vent. Regardless of what you choose, I am in your corner. And I think that that's the most important thing that I feel like I can contribute is I'm not going to lie to you and put on rose colored glasses and be like, "No, girl, it's fine." If someone is treating my friend like shit, I'm going to tell you you're treating my friend like shit, but I'm
Mhm.
not going to make you uncomfortable in the sense where you feel like now you can't bring him around me, or I'm not going to do that. So I feel like my approach is like that honesty, but with the assurance that no matter what you choose to do, whether it takes you a year, 10 years to break up with that loser, I am going to be in your corner.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm sure you had people say really fun things to you when you were going through it. I definitely had friends who I thought loved me, who they love me very much, but said really not helpful things.
Well,
So,
what's really funny? Nobody really stood up. I did have a friend on my wedding day came to me, and as I was like in my gown, ready to walk down the aisle, and she looked at me and she was like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I was like, "What?" Yes. And she was like, "I'm not. I'm just saying that if you want to go, I will literally take you out of here. No one don't. I don't." And I go, "You're being ridiculous. Of course I want to do this." Now looking back, I've been like, "Oh, I should have run away. Boop, right? I should have done that." But, I think that my friends personally, I think were so scared for me to cut them off because I think they
yeah,
saw that when someone spoke up, I immediately cut that person out of my life because I didn't want to hear it. So I
yeah.
think my friends kept their opinions to themselves for the most part until we were divorced, and then the floodgates opened, and I was like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I was like, "Never mind. I don't answer that. I know why you didn't tell me."
yeah.
So I think everyone's different. It's not a cookie cutter
No,
situation.
it's
Everybody
No.
not.
is more and less receptive depending on their
Yeah.
personality, where they are in their life. I mean, I was literally a shell of myself. When people meet me now and they hear stories from when I was married the first time, they're like, "How were you so like submissive and whatever?" And I'm like,
Mhm.
"I don't know what to tell you. I just left my body. I
Me
just
too.
left
Me
my
too,
body
Rachel.
and existed."
Yeah, I get it. I really do. I mean, I was the
Eh,
girl that had to make sure that the laundry was done, and
So he
that
had his matching socks every
yeah,
day, the right
little things like
socks.
that. I really
I
get
think
it.
so much of it is like the good girl path, right? Like we
Yeah.
all were on the good girl path, and this is the guy, and he knows my family, and I'm gonna marry him because what am I gonna? I remember right before my ex and I broke up, I had a dream. We were talking about having kids, and I was talking about having kids, and he was kind of listening, and in our reality, and I had this dream that I had a baby with somebody else, and I thought, oh my God, but like, I don't know this person. I don't know their values. I don't know how they feel about having kids and raising them and all these things and how they're going to treat them. And that's what it felt like. It felt like, I know he's never going to hit the kid. I know he's never, I know he's not going to do this. And it was this good girl path. And when you're on the good girl path, you want to be the good wife, even if you're a feminist. Like it's such a mind fuck.
Mhm.
It
It's such a
is.
mind fuck.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, what is coming up for you this next year?
Oh, I started a podcast with my friend of 30 years, platonic friend, Dale, who works for the Miami Heat and is a local celebrity down here. And that has been amazing. We're almost 50 episodes in. And so that will continue. And I hope that will keep growing. And we're having some really fun and important conversations. So that will continue. And that's available wherever you podcast. And I have a book proposal out that's being pitched as we speak. And I'm praying that that gets bought this year because I'd love to finally write my book, and then everything else just writing. I'm focusing on writing. I have speaking stuff coming up. I'm the keynote speaker for the Mother of All Baby Showers events that's in
Mm.
multiple markets. And so the first one is actually this Friday in Orlando. And those are like amazing to get to be around all the pregos. And they're so happy and hopeful and cute. And it's a room filled with incredible energy. And I really, really love that part of my job. So just a lot of speaking, a lot of writing, and hopefully a book this year.
Yeah, I love that. And I can tell you from my perspective, I worked with Rachel on some influencer stuff, and she was one of the best influencers that I worked with. And I worked
Oh,
with some
thank you.
doozies. So she she's not just, a lot of times when we talk to people on the podcast, we meet them on social media or whatever, you truly are who you say you are. And I want people to understand that. Like, there's nothing that you're like, you really are the incredibly compassionate, funny, sarcastic, wonderful person you are. That's not just like a social media person. And I can say that as somebody that's known you a while. So
Thank you so much. That is like I just got chills, but that is really, I very much appreciate that.
it's true. It's true. So Rachel, if anybody's going through a fresh start, what would be some wise words that you could impart to them?
Listen to the support that's around you, but at the end of the day, you are living your life and making your own decisions. And so, like I said before, I think it's really important to go through the yuckiness and to feel it and really sit in it. If you sit in it and you actually let it kind of take over your life a little bit and feel it, that's how I think you effectively get through it and you find your way to the other side in a way where you can heal in the best way possible for you. And so lean on people. Don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're struggling, talk to your doctor. It took me till this year to ask for anti-anxiety meds. And I'm not anti-medication. I am pro science everything, but I never thought I needed it. And now that I am on Zoloft for the first time in my life, I can't believe I waited so long. And I wish I would have, I wish I would have had this tool going through my divorce. I think it would have changed my perspective. So if you're suffering, you don't have to suffer. There is science and store-bought serotonin that can help you until you get to the other side. And so I'd say just live it. Just don't be, it sucks and it's scary, but you got to go through it to get to the other side.
So true. And then the last question, our favorite question, what was the last thing that you ate and truly loved? And you do a lot of restaurants. You're out trying things. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm going to blow your mind and not even give you, like, I've been to some pretty incredible restaurants in the last several weeks that have been amazing and are a lot to talk about, but I'm going to be very honest with you that I have this illness where I follow like all these people on TikTok and do all like the TikTok trends that people are eating. So I have probably for the last 3 months, and this is no exaggeration, at least once a day, I eat the viral cottage cheese toast. And I'm not even like a cottage cheese super fan, but I toast bread, I put cottage cheese, and then I put an egregious amount of the Trader Joe's chili onion crunch spicy oil, and some hot honey. And I'm not kidding that like I'm about to have it right now, and I have it multiple times a day, and I am unhealthily obsessed with it to the point that the woman at Trader Joe's was like, "You're buying 3 things at a time." And I was like, "I only have 2 in my cabinet right now." And she was like, "Girl," and I'm like, "No, I am afraid you're going to take it away and discontinue it." So like the minute I hear that's happening, I'm going to start hoarding it like a doomsday preparer. But that is my latest obsession, and I eat it every chance that I get.
I love that.
I love
Jenny
that.
loves hot honey.
The hot honey. I had peanut butter toast with hot honey last night. It's so good.
So good.
Maybe that's like a product you're gonna have to get into, Rachel. Rachel's hot honey. Rachel and the hot honey.
I love it.
I can see it.
Picture of Jason on the front.
Yeah, picture of Jason on the front. The hot honey. Yeah. Rachel, you are the best. You're welcome back anytime to chat. And we're just so excited about everything you're doing. And, we're going to put all of our good vibes into the universe for your book proposal. And just, keep up the amazing work. Because, we talk about this a lot. Sometimes when you are like I use the term influencer, but I don't even mean that. When you help other people on the internet, you're just like kind of in your house in your pajamas and like you don't think about what you're doing, but you really, really are changing lives. And the space that you give to people to share their honest truth and to manifest and to dream and to have the support in your community is unparalleled to really like so many things out there. So just keep up the amazing work you're doing.
Thank you. And you guys too, what you guys have created to help people who are going through the whole fresh start thing is so empowering. And I'm so all about it. And I just think it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to show people that, there is life on the other side and that there's something to be celebrated. And so thank you for what you guys are doing.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's story. We're always here and we're proud of you.
A Fresh Story is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the first and only platform for everything you need to begin again. You can read the show notes and learn more about today's episode at afreshstory.com.
As always, we want to remind our listeners that while we strive to provide accurate and helpful information, we are not medical doctors or mental health professionals. We want to remind you all that the information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice. We highly recommend consulting a qualified healthcare or mental health professional for any concerns or questions you may have. Remember, we are a podcast, but we are not licensed medical professionals. Always consult with your healthcare provider for any medical decisions. And as a gentle reminder, all opinions are our guests and do not necessarily reflect our own.